We were making love when I made a joke about his size. What he did next left me shocked.
Hey Reddit. First time posting but have been lurking on here for a while. I really don't know what to do. My husband doesn't want to talk to me, and he seems so set in his decision. I'm so confused, and I know this is my fault, but I feel incredibly sorry. I don't want him to leave me, but it feels like that's exactly what's going to happen. It all started on that flight, when I playfully mocked him as weak on the airplane, and then he stood up and shocked me, and everyone else. To give you some context, my name is Ava, and I'm 32 years old. My husband Ryan is 31, and we've been married for about 3 years now. Before that, we dated for 4 years. Our relationship has always been amazing, at least I thought so. We have a great sex life, and Ryan is incredibly romantic. He's always been the type of person to go out of his way to make sure I'm happy, and I've always appreciated that. He's the main provider for our family, and I'm a stay-at-home wife, taking care of the chores and housework. I know that sounds kind of traditional, but honestly, it works for us. Ryan's never complained, and I've always liked being able to focus on our home and not have the stress of a job. To be honest, I've never been a big fan of working. I get bored very quickly, and Ryan has always been supportive of me doing what makes me happy. Ryan is the definition of an easygoing person. He's so kind and gentle, always looking to keep the peace. But if I'm being honest, he's had one issue that's always been a bit of a problem for us. Ryan just can't take a joke, like at all. Now, this was never a huge deal for me because I love him the way he is. But for my family, that became kind of an issue. You see, they're huge on humor, especially teasing. They believe in bonding through playful banter, and for years they've tried to include Ryan in that. But no matter what, he just couldn't seem to take a joke, and it started to bother them. I remember my mom telling me once about how it felt like Ryan didn't like them. That really hit me hard. I knew Ryan didn't dislike them, but he just wasn't wired the same way. My family, being the jokesters they are, thought it was something they could fix if they kept teasing him, trying to break down his walls. But instead, it made things awkward, and I could see the way Ryan would tense up whenever we visited them. After hearing them voice their concerns more than once, I started to think that maybe the problem was with Ryan's inability to handle teasing. I stupidly thought that if I played along and teased him more myself, he would eventually get used to it. I figured if I started mocking him in a playful way, it might help him loosen up, and he'd start laughing along, maybe even giving some jokes back. It seemed harmless at the time. Just fun, right? But now, looking back, I realize how wrong I was. What I didn't see was how my teasing was actually hurting him. I never considered that my words might cut deeper than I intended, or that he might be silently carrying the weight of all those jokes. I thought I was helping him fit in better with my family, but in reality, I was pushing him further away from both them and me. So I started doing it more, teasing him here and there, making little jokes about how he couldn't handle certain situations, or how he wasn't as strong or confident as other men. It wasn't anything malicious, at least not in my mind. To me, it was just playful banter, you know, the kind of lighthearted ribbing that couples do with each other. I thought it was harmless, and in my head, I figured he would eventually get used to it. I thought that if I joked with him enough, it would help him loosen up, and then maybe he'd be able to take jokes from everyone else too, especially my family. The thing is, Ryan never really said much about it. Sometimes he would just give me a small smile, as if to brush it off, or maybe he'd shake his head and move on. It didn't seem like he was really bothered by it. I assumed that if he didn't like what I was saying, he'd tell me. He's never been the type to hold back when something truly bothered him. At least that's what I believed. But when it came to my family, that was a different story. If they said something even remotely teasing, Ryan would frown or give them this deadpan expression that made things awkward. He wouldn't laugh along or play it off like he did with me. Instead, he'd respond with something like, "I didn't sign up for mocking," or "I'm not here to be the butt of the jokes." And honestly, that just made my family more uncomfortable around him. I could see the frustration on their faces, and I felt stuck in the middle, trying to explain to them that Ryan just wasn't a jokey person. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs. But at the time, I thought that if I teased him enough, he'd open up to it, and it would somehow smooth things over with everyone. I thought that if Ryan wasn't saying anything to me when I teased him, that meant it was fine. After all, we were close, closer than anyone else in his life, so if he really didn't like it, surely he would have said something, right? In my head, it made sense. If Ryan wasn't comfortable enough to joke with my family, then maybe I could help him by easing him into it through me. I wasn't trying to make him feel small or insulted. I thought it was just the normal kind of banter every couple goes through. I genuinely believed I was doing him a favor by pushing him a little bit. That's why every time I teased him, I'd brush it off if he didn't react. I'd think to myself, he'll get there eventually. He just needs time. But what I didn't realize was that he wasn't laughing it off like I thought. He wasn't just brushing it aside like I assumed. Instead, every comment I made, every little joke I thought was harmless, was slowly chipping away at him. There were a lot of moments when I mocked him, and honestly, now that I think about it, they weren't just harmless jokes. They were mocking. I can see that now. At the time, I convinced myself I was teasing him, trying to get him to lighten up. But the truth is I was making fun of him, and I did it both in private and in front of others. Here are just a few of the things I said and did to him. I remember once we were at home, just the two of us, and he struggled to open a jar of pasta sauce. I just stood there watching him twist and turn the lid, his hands turning red from the effort. Instead of offering to help, or at least keeping my mouth shut, I complained about how weak he was. I said, "It's just a jar. Do I need to call my dad to come open it for you?" He finally managed to pop it open, and he gave me a strange smile, but I brushed it off. In my head, it was all a joke. He'd get over it, right? But I can still see the look on his face now, and I realize how condescending and cruel I must have sounded. Another time, we were at a friend's barbecue, and there was a game of tug-of-war happening. Ryan was on a team with a few of his buddies, and they were losing badly. I stood on the sidelines laughing, and when they lost, I shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, "Come on, Ryan! You can't even win a game of tug-of-war! Where's all that gym time going? I bet my 12-year-old nephew could beat you." Everyone laughed, including Ryan, but now I realize it was one of those awkward, forced laughs, the kind where you're just trying to keep your dignity, even though the words have stung deeper than they should. My family had always been vocal about their frustration with Ryan's inability to take a joke, so I thought that maybe if I poked fun at him in front of them, it would somehow break the ice. One night during dinner with my family, I teased him about how nervous he gets when ordering food at restaurants. Ryan has always been a bit shy and weak about speaking up or making changes to his order, so I said, "You'll probably order plain toast and still be too scared to ask for butter." Everyone laughed, but Ryan's face dropped. He laughed along, but it didn't reach his eyes. At the time, I thought I was helping, making him loosen up, but I see now that I was just humiliating him in front of people who were already judging him. Even on vacation with our friends, I couldn't stop myself. We were trying ziplining for the first time, and Ryan has always been a little scared of heights. He hesitated for a moment before jumping off the platform, and without thinking twice, I shouted, "Oh my God, Ryan, just jump already! Are you really that scared? What's the worst that could happen? Don't worry, I'll be here to catch you if you fall." Everyone laughed, but I saw the look on his face as he zipped down the line. For the rest of the day, he was unusually quiet, and instead of asking if something was wrong, I just told myself he was tired from the adrenaline. The worst was at the gym. I remember this one so clearly because it happened in front of a group of people. Ryan and I were working out together, and he was struggling with one of the weight machines. He was trying his best, but instead of encouraging him, I walked up just to get a laugh at his expense. "Oh, come on, that's all you've got. You're barely lifting anything. Do you want me to come over and show you how it's done?" The guys around us laughed, and Ryan just sighed, put down the weights, and we left the gym early that day. I remember the drive home was silent. At the time, I figured he was just tired or annoyed with the workout. I didn't realize then that I had humiliated him in front of strangers and mocked his efforts when he was trying his best. Looking back, I can see how much I was hurting him. In my mind, it was all in good fun, but for Ryan, it must have been constant reminders that I didn't see him as strong or capable. I thought I was making him stronger by pushing him to handle the jokes, but I was just stripping away his confidence little by little. Each of those moments was like a drop in the bucket, and I didn't realize how full that bucket was until it all came crashing down. I was so dense, now I realize I was completely oblivious to what was happening right in front of me. Even when he started to distance himself from me bit by bit, I still didn't notice. I guess I convinced myself that everything was fine because I didn't want to face the truth, that I was slowly pushing him away. It started gradually, and at first, I didn't see the signs for what they really were. He began to pull back, not just emotionally, but physically as well. He wasn't as affectionate or intimate with me anymore. The guy who used to pull me close every chance he got, who'd kiss me good morning and good night without fail, now barely touched me. And when he did, it felt off, like there was a wall between us. I'd reach out for him, but his responses were half-hearted, almost mechanical. I remember thinking, maybe he's just stressed. And I convinced myself that he was just going through a phase, that he would eventually snap out of it. I never once considered that I might be the reason behind his growing distance. Our sex life, which had always been incredible, started to fade. We used to be so connected, so in sync, but then the intimacy became rare, almost non-existent. When we did have sex, it lacked the passion and warmth we used to share. It felt more like a chore, something obligatory rather than an expression of love. And again, instead of talking to him about it, I brushed it off. I thought, he's just tired. Work is taking a toll on him. I refused to see that this was more than just physical exhaustion. This was emotional withdrawal, but I was too wrapped up in my own world to see it. Ryan also stopped doing the little romantic things he used to do. He used to leave me sweet notes in the morning or text me randomly throughout the day, just to say he loved me. Those notes and texts stopped. He didn't plan little date nights or surprise me with flowers like he used to. Even the small gestures like holding my hand when we walked together or rubbing my back when we sat on the couch disappeared. It wasn't just that he stopped being romantic. It was like he stopped caring. But I didn't question it. I chalked it up to the idea that maybe after years of being together, the honeymoon phase had just ended. I thought it was normal for things to cool down a little after being together for so long. He started spending longer hours at work, too. Ryan never used to be the type to work late unless he had a big project going on, but suddenly he was staying late almost every night. He would leave the house early in the morning and come back after dark, and when I asked him about it, he'd just say he had things to take care of. It didn't make sense to me because I knew his job wasn't that demanding. He was choosing to stay away, but I still made up excuses in my head. I thought, he's working hard for us, for our future, or maybe he's trying to prove himself to his boss. I never stopped to think that maybe he was staying at work to avoid coming home to me. Even when we were at home together, there was this uncomfortable distance between us. We used to spend our evenings cuddled up on the couch, watching movies or talking about our day. Now he'd sit on one side of the room while I sat on the other, both of us lost in our phones or staring at the TV in silence. There was no laughter, no playful banter like there used to be. Our conversations became shallow, nothing more than small talk. He'd ask how my day was, I'd ask how his was, and that was it. No deeper connection, no real communication. It was like we were roommates rather than husband and wife. And yet through all of this, I still didn't get it. I was so blinded by my own ignorance that I didn't see what was happening. I didn't see how I had pushed him away, how my constant mockery had chipped away at his self-esteem, his confidence, and eventually our relationship. I didn't see that he was pulling away from me because I had hurt him over and over again. Instead, I made excuses. He's stressed. He's just tired. It's normal for things to cool down after a while. I told myself every lie I could think of because I didn't want to face the truth, that my actions had consequences, and that those consequences were now threatening to destroy everything we had built together. Looking back now, I can't believe how blind I was. The signs were all there, screaming at me, and I just ignored them. I ignored the fact that Ryan was no longer happy, no longer the man he used to be, and it was all because of me. I thought I was being funny, thought I was helping him lighten up, but instead I was breaking him down, piece by piece, and by the time I realized what I had done, it was already too late. I wish I had realized how wrong I was, quick enough to stop myself before it all fell apart. I wish I had seen how my actions were destroying him piece by piece, but I didn't. The worst part is, I wasn't just mocking him about silly things. No, it was worse than that. I would mock him about things he had confided in me, things he had told me in private, trusting me with his fears, insecurities, and vulnerabilities. And I used them against him, thoughtlessly, carelessly, just to get a laugh or some twisted form of entertainment. Things finally came to a head on that flight. It was supposed to be a family vacation. Both of our families were coming together for the holidays, and we were hoping it would be a time for bonding. Ryan was excited about it too, even though things had been tense between us for a while. We saw this as a chance to reset, to get away from work, from stress, and just focus on each other and our families. But Ryan's work got delayed, and we couldn't leave with the rest of the family as planned. Everyone went ahead of us, and we told them we'd catch up a couple of days later. It wasn't a big deal at the time. It was just a small delay, and I thought everything would be fine. When we finally boarded the flight, I noticed how quiet Ryan was. He was watching a movie, headphones in, and didn't seem interested in talking. I was bored, restless, and I wanted his attention. Now I see that he was avoiding me, but back then, I didn't care. I was too wrapped up in myself, too focused on wanting to have fun, even if it meant bothering him. So I started poking fun at him, like I always did. I made him turn off his movie so I could have his attention, and I began teasing him. There was a slight turbulence, and I saw him jolt in his seat. That was all I needed to start my mockery. Ryan had told me before that he had a fear of flying. He had been in a bad accident as a kid, and ever since then, flying made him nervous. It was something he had trusted me with, something personal and private, and instead of supporting him, I used it against him. I laughed at him for being scared. I called him weak, said things like, "Oh my God, Ryan, it's just turbulence. Are you really that scared?" I was loud, obnoxious, and some of the people seated near us even chuckled. That was all the encouragement I needed to keep going. I kept at it, making fun of him for being afraid, for jolting at every bump. I didn't realize how cruel I was being until it was too late. Ryan's face changed. I could see the frustration and anger building up, but I didn't stop. It was like I was so used to mocking him that I didn't even notice when I crossed the line. And then suddenly, Ryan stood up. His face was red with anger, and in a voice louder than I had ever heard from him before, he told me to shut up. I froze. He had never, in all our years together, spoken to me like that. The cabin around us fell silent, and people started to look over. I didn't know what to say or do. Then Ryan reached for the overhead bin, pulled down a small bag, and took out a stack of papers. He threw them onto my lap. I looked down, and my heart sank when I saw what they were. Divorce papers. My mind went blank. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Divorce papers, on a flight, in front of all these people. I was completely shocked. Ryan was still standing, and his voice was shaking with emotions as he spoke. He said he was done with me, with my mocking, done with me treating him like he was worthless, that he had tried so hard to be enough for me, to make this work, but I didn't even appreciate him. All I ever did was tear him down, and that he couldn't take it anymore, that he was tired of feeling like less than a man, like he was never good enough. Then he sat back down, and the silence between us was deafening. People around us were glancing over, some even openly staring. I could feel their judgment. I could feel their eyes on me, and it was obvious what they were thinking. I was the bad guy in this situation. I was the one who had pushed him to this point, and now, here we were. The rest of the flight was awkward, to say the least. Ryan didn't speak to me for the remainder of the flight, and I just sat there staring at the divorce papers in my lap. My mind was racing, but I couldn't think of a single thing to say. I wanted to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was sit there in stunned silence, realizing that I had pushed the man I loved to the breaking point. When we finally landed, things didn't get any better. It's been 2 days now, and Ryan still hasn't spoken to me. We're here with our families, and they've noticed that things are off between us, but I don't think they understand just how bad it is. They've tried to suggest couple bonding activities like going for walks or doing things together, but Ryan shuts them down every time. He's avoiding me completely, and I don't know how to fix this. The divorce papers are still with me, sitting in my bag, and I can't bring myself to sign them. I don't want a divorce. I know this is all my fault. I know I've hurt him in ways I didn't even realize until now. But I don't want to lose him. I love him, and I can see now just how much I've taken him for granted. I need help. I don't know how to fix this, how to undo the damage I've done. I don't want to lose Ryan, but I'm terrified that it's already too late. Update. Hey Reddit. First off, I've got to say, I didn't expect this post to blow up the way it did. I was thinking I'd get a couple of comments, maybe a few people weighing in. But wow, it seems like everyone on Reddit has something to say. Haha, it's overwhelming and not in the way I hoped. Second, let me address the obvious. I've seen a lot of comments saying I fucked around and found out. And yeah, I know that, I get it. That's why I came here in the first place, because I messed up and I needed advice on how to fix it. But honestly, the amount of people just jumping in to mock me hasn't exactly been helpful. I was hoping for more than just people telling me to lawyer up or sign the divorce papers and let my husband go. I know that's probably what I deserve, but it's hard to hear, and it doesn't make this situation any easier. And then there are the DMs. Don't even get me started. I've been flooded with insults, people calling me all sorts of names. Some of you guys seriously need to chill. But I'm not here to play the victim. I know what I did was wrong. That's why I came here, to figure out how to fix it, not to get dragged through the mud even more. So yeah, thanks for the help, Reddit. Really appreciate it. Sarcasm, in case that wasn't obvious. As for an actual update, well, there isn't much to say. It's been 5 days now and my husband is still refusing to talk to me. We're stuck here on this so-called family vacation that's supposed to last 2 weeks, and it's just awkward. Everyone's noticed the tension, and they've been trying to help by suggesting things for us to do together, like couple bonding activities. The sad part is, I actually want to try. I want to fix this. I want to talk. But Ryan isn't having it. He's completely shut down, and I get why. He's been avoiding me, and honestly, I don't even blame him anymore. I was a terrible wife, constantly mocking him, making him feel small. I didn't realize how much I was hurting him until it was too late. I can see now that he's done, and I'm scared he's going to go through with the divorce. It's not looking good, but for now, there's not much I can do. I keep trying to approach him, but he's made it clear he's not ready to talk, and I don't want to push him away even further. I feel like I'm just stuck here, waiting for the inevitable. I want to fight for this marriage, but I'm starting to realize that maybe Ryan's already made up his mind, and I don't know if there's anything I can do to change that. So yeah, that's the update. Not much has changed. We're still stuck in this silent standoff, and I have no idea what's going to happen next. I'll probably update again if something actually happens, but right now, it feels like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm not ready to give up yet, but I don't know if I have a choice. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. So here's a bit of an update since I finally had that conversation with Ryan. It wasn't easy, but it happened. I didn't want to force him to talk, but things were just at a standstill, and we couldn't keep ignoring each other forever. Everyone else had gone out for something we all originally planned on doing together, some kind of family activity. But Ryan wasn't interested, and I just couldn't go along with everyone, knowing what was hanging over my head. So I stayed back, hoping this would finally be the moment he'd talk. After everyone left, I went up to him, and to my surprise, he actually talked to me. We had a long conversation, and honestly, I don't have the energy or the desire to go into every single detail right now. But I'll tell you what matters. We're getting a divorce. That's it. Ryan is completely checked out. He made it clear there's no fixing this. He doesn't want to go to couples counseling. He doesn't want to try to bond with me anymore. He doesn't even want therapy, for himself or for us. He just wants me out of his life. His exact words were, "I want you out of my life." Hearing him say that, it broke me. I started crying, begging him not to go through with the divorce, but he wouldn't listen. He said he was sorry, but that he couldn't take it anymore. He told me that I had chipped away at every bit of joy in his life and that he was just done. There was nothing left for him in this relationship. He told me he had endured for so long, hoping I'd finally realize what I was doing and stop, but I never did. At one point, I asked him why he didn't just talk to me earlier, why he didn't tell me how much I was hurting him. He just looked at me, and said that I should have noticed on my own. He reminded me that he's not confrontational, that he's never been the kind of person to openly talk about his feelings. He said, "You know that about me, and still you kept doing it? Who mocks their partner like that?" I didn't have an answer for him because he's right. I can't defend the way I treated him. So yeah, that's it, we're getting a divorce. I've cried so much I feel numb. Ryan's moved out of our room. Since we're on this family vacation, everyone booked rooms based on their status. Married couples together, those dating together, and singles or kids shared rooms. Now with Ryan moving out, as there was no more space in the Airbnb, he decided to book himself a room at a hotel nearby. He doesn't want to stay with me anymore. He said he still wants to enjoy the holiday, but I just don't see how that's possible now. How can he enjoy the vacation knowing that he's just ripped my world apart? It feels so cruel, like he's completely detached himself from this whole mess. And while I'm here, drowning in guilt and sadness, he's off booking a hotel, moving on like nothing even happened. I'm honestly shattered. This was supposed to be a bonding trip, a chance to relax with both of our families. Now it's turned into the worst nightmare I could have imagined, and I don't even know how I'm supposed to act around everyone else. I guess that's it for now. I don't know if I'll update again, or if I even have the energy to keep writing about this. But yeah, that's where we're at. We're getting a divorce. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Sorry for the radio silence, but I've been in a really dark place. I tried to keep myself busy and distracted, but honestly, logging back on here didn't feel great after all the comments I got before. I know I deserve some of it. Hell, maybe all of it, but it was just too much. Anyway, here's the update. After Ryan moved out of our Airbnb and booked a hotel down the road, things came back from their outing, and of course they asked where Ryan was. I didn't know what to say. I mean, I was still in tears, completely wrecked. They could tell something was wrong, but they didn't push. Then Ryan came for dinner, and that's when everything went off the rails. He sat everyone down and spilled everything. The divorce, why he was leaving, how he couldn't take it anymore. And the craziest part, his family fully supported him. I was floored. They said they had noticed how much I mocked him and had been uncomfortable with it for a while. Apparently, they had even told Ryan that they didn't like how I treated him, but they never voiced it to me because they didn't want to cause tension. Hearing that was like a punch to the gut. I had no idea they felt that way, and to be honest, I always thought we were all just joking around. But I guess the jokes weren't as harmless as I thought. That's when things really escalated. My family, being the jokesters we are, immediately started defending me. They said it was just jokes, that Ryan needed to learn how to take a joke, and that he was being too sensitive. It was like watching two worlds collide. Ryan's family was on his side, saying that he deserved better, while my family kept doubling down that it wasn't that serious and that he was overreacting. It got ugly, fast. The argument started to get heated, and before I knew it, things were about to get physical. Ryan's family wasn't having it, though. They were the ones who had organized and paid for the Airbnb, so they kicked us out. Me and my whole family. I couldn't believe it. They refunded us the money we had paid, but that didn't change the fact that we were essentially thrown out on the street. To make matters worse, I overheard Ryan's family telling him to come back to the Airbnb, to stop staying at the hotel. They wanted him back with them, not separated off like he had been. Meanwhile, my family and I were scrambling to find another place to stay. It wasn't easy, since we were a large group and we needed something affordable. We ended up finding a hotel eventually, but the whole situation was humiliating. The rest of the vacation? Honestly, it was a disaster. We went through the motions of trying to have our own little vacation after being kicked out, but nothing felt right. I was so drained and upset I could barely enjoy anything. It just felt like a countdown to the inevitable. A few days before the vacation ended, Ryan sent me a text. It was short, cold. He told me not to bother coming home, that he would pack up my things and drop them off at my parents' house. Sure enough, when I got back, all my stuff was sitting on their porch, like I was some kind of stranger. That was it. No goodbye, no final conversation, just my things on the doorstep. I guess that was Ryan's way of drawing the line. It hurt like hell, but at the same time, I think I already knew it was over. We haven't spoken since. I signed the divorce papers. It's official. We're done. I can't believe it's actually happening, but I guess that's where things stand. I fucked up, and now I'm paying the price for it. So yeah, Reddit, there's your update. We're getting a divorce, and I guess this is the end of my marriage. I don't know where I'll go from here, but that's where I'm at right now. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. First off, sorry for the radio silence. I'm not even sure why I feel the need to apologize, but I guess that's just how I am. Anyway, I'm finally back, and I owe you all an update, or rather, one final update. So here I am, delivering it. The divorce is finalized. Yeah, I know, it didn't take long. A couple of months, and that was it. How did things end up? Well, let me tell you, I got absolutely screwed over. First of all, the house, Ryan's, the cars, Ryan's. Everything, literally everything, was his. We had joint accounts, but all the real money in them was his too. I didn't get a cent. And because we were only married for about 3 years, I didn't qualify for spousal support or alimony. There were no premarital assets to fight over, no shared properties or anything. It was all his. And me? I got nothing. Nada. Zilch. It didn't matter that I had been a stay-at-home wife, building our home together, making sure everything ran smoothly while he worked. In the eyes of the law, that counted for nothing. And since we didn't have any kids, child support wasn't on the table either. I was left with nothing but my clothes, and whatever sentimental crap I managed to keep. Honestly, it felt like the divorce was over in the blink of an eye. Something that had meant so much to me, something I thought would last a lifetime, ended in less than an hour in a courthouse. Just like that, it was all gone. I cried then, and I'm still crying now. My family, bless them, has been trying to cheer me up, telling me that Ryan didn't deserve me anyway. But the truth, I know I didn't deserve him. This is all on me. I fucked up and I'm paying the price. Now I've got to find a job. That's the next step, right? But the job market is terrible and it's been a nightmare trying to find something. I've sent out applications, but no luck so far. Everything feels pointless. I haven't updated in a while because I've been trying to get my life back in order. And to be real with you, I'm nowhere near that yet. First of all, I'm depressed. I'm really deeply depressed. I'm traumatized by everything that's happened. I miss Ryan so much I can barely stand it. I want to go back to him, to fix everything. I regret every single decision I made that led us here. If there were a time machine, I'd jump into it in a heartbeat. But there isn't. All I have is regret and this gaping hole in my life where Ryan used to be. Second, I'm living at my parents' house now, and it's awful. It's crowded, noisy, and I hate it. But what choice do I have? The alternative is being homeless, and while that's crossed my mind, I know it's not a real option. So here I am, stuck in this suffocating situation, surrounded by family who mean well, but can't help me the way I need them to. Third, Ryan, he's doing just fine. More than fine, actually. It's like he checked out of the marriage emotionally long before we divorced, because he seems completely unbothered by everything. I've been stalking his social media. I know, pathetic, right? But I can't help it. Every time I see a new post, it's like he's living his best life. He's out there traveling, smiling, doing all the things we used to do together, but without me. Meanwhile, I'm here, wallowing in misery, guilt, and depression. So yeah, Reddit, that's the update. I hope you're all happy. The things people said to me in the comments hit me harder than I expected, but I guess it's nothing compared to the reality I'm facing now. I fucked around and I found out, and now I have to live with the consequences. That's it, that's the update. I kissed my boyfriend's best friend in truth, or there. The night was just supposed to be about fun. You know, the kind of fun that takes you back to high school days when life was simpler and you could stay up late without worrying about the mess your life had become. It was the first time in a long time that I let myself relax like that, surrounded by friends, laughter, and just the right amount of alcohol. We were at my best friend Sarah's place, the perfect setting for one of those late-night games that everyone swears they're too old for but secretly loves. And that's how we ended up playing Truth or Dare. You know, Truth or Dare is a dangerous game. It's like Russian roulette, but with emotions. Everyone's always so brave, daring others to do the most ridiculous things or asking the most invasive questions, all under the guise of just having fun. But the truth is, we all know where it leads. someone getting hurt, or someone's secrets coming out. I should have known better, but I was tipsy and feeling bold, so I let my guard down. The night was flowing well, the dares were getting crazier, and the truths were getting more personal. I was the last one to go, and of course, someone dared me to kiss David. You see, David is my boyfriend's best friend, and we've all been close for years. I laughed it off at first, but everyone else was encouraging me to do it, saying it was no big deal. My boyfriend wasn't there. He was out of town on a business trip, and I figured it was harmless. I mean, what's a kiss between friends, right? So, I did it. I kissed him. It was only for a few seconds, just a quick peck on the lips. But those few seconds felt like an eternity. It wasn't like it meant anything, at least not at the time. But the way he looked at me afterward, like there was something more behind it, made me feel weird. I quickly brushed it off, though. It was just a game. That's what I kept telling myself. But I couldn't shake that feeling. The rest of the night went on as if nothing happened, but in the back of my mind, I kept replaying that kiss over and over. It wasn't like it was my first time doing something stupid. God knows I've made my fair share of mistakes. Like, let's talk about how I ended up with a kid before I even got married. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's part of my story. I was young, in my early 20s, and thought I was in love with this guy, Jake. We weren't exactly serious, but we had this on-again, off-again thing that I thought was going somewhere. Long story short, I got pregnant. Jake wasn't exactly thrilled, and we tried to make it work for a while, but it was clear we were better off apart. He's still in our kid's life, though, which is more than I can say for some other dads out there. So, there I was, a single mom in my mid-20s, trying to figure out how to balance work, motherhood, and some semblance of a social life. I wasn't looking for anything serious when I met my boyfriend, Chris. We met at this coffee shop I used to go to all the time. I was there with my son, trying to get some work done while he napped in his stroller. Chris was sitting at the table next to me, and he struck up a conversation about how cute my kid was. At first, I thought he was just being polite, but we ended up talking for hours. There was this easy connection between us, something I hadn't felt in a long time. We exchanged numbers, and the rest, as they say, is history. He stepped up in a way I never expected anyone to. He treated my son like his own and never once made me feel like I was damaged goods because I had a child from a previous relationship. He made me believe in love again, in the possibility of a future where I wasn't just someone's mom but someone's partner too. We've been together for a few years now, and things have been good for the most part. Even with us not being married, relationships aren't easy, and anyone who says it is lying. There are days when we're perfectly in sync, like we're the only two people in the world who matter. And then there are days when I wonder if we've just gotten too comfortable, if maybe we're taking each other for granted. And then there's David. He's been Chris's best friend since forever, and we've all become close over the years. He's practically family. I never thought of him as anything more than a friend, until that stupid kiss. And now I can't help but wonder if maybe there's something there that I've been ignoring. I know how this sounds. It sounds like I'm setting the stage for something terrible, like I'm justifying something that hasn't even happened yet. But that's not it, I swear. It's just, that kiss made me think about a lot of things. My life, my relationship, the choices I've made, and the ones I haven't. I don't want to be that person who ruins everything for a moment of weakness. I love my boyfriend, and I love our life together. But I also know that life isn't black and white, and sometimes things happen that you can't explain. Maybe that's just an excuse, or maybe it's the truth. I don't know. What I do know is that I can't stop thinking about that kiss, and it's driving me crazy. After that night, everything seemed normal on the surface. I went home, kissed my son goodnight, and went to bed like any other day. But inside, my mind was racing, replaying those few seconds with David over and over. I couldn't figure out why it was bothering me so much. It wasn't like I had never kissed anyone other than Chris before, but this was different. It felt like something had shifted, like I'd opened a door I wasn't supposed to. The next day, I tried to shake it off. I got myself busy with the usual routine, getting my son ready for school, going to work, and keeping myself occupied with errands. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. It didn't help that David had texted me the next morning, something casual about how much fun the night was. He didn't mention the kiss, and neither did I, but just seeing his name pop up on my phone made my heart race. I couldn't talk to anyone about it either. It felt too weird, too complicated. Sarah would have listened, of course, but she was the one who dared me to kiss him in the first place. How could I tell her that it had messed with my head, that I was starting to question everything because of it? And I definitely couldn't talk to Chris. He's never been the jealous type, but I couldn't imagine how he'd react if he knew what was going on in my head. How do you explain to your boyfriend that a harmless game had suddenly made you rethink your entire relationship? The days turned into weeks, and I did my best to pretend everything was fine. I kept my distance from David, making excuses whenever he wanted to hang out. Chris didn't seem to notice. He was busy with work, and when he was home, we fell into our usual routine. But I couldn't help but feel like I was living a double life, one where I was a good wife and mother on the outside, but inside, I was a mess of confusion and guilt. It wasn't long before I started to notice the tension between me and Chris. It was subtle at first, just little things like snapping at each other over stupid stuff or going to bed without saying goodnight. But it started to build, like a pressure cooker ready to explode. We were both too stubborn to talk about it, too afraid of what might come out if we did. So we let it simmer, each of us pretending that everything was fine when it was anything but that. One night, after a particularly rough day at work, I came home to find Chris sitting on the couch, staring at his phone, with a look I couldn't quite place. I asked him what was wrong, and he just shook his head, saying it was nothing. But I knew him well enough to know that wasn't true. Something was off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it had something to do with me. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I finally decided to break the silence. I told him I felt like we'd been drifting apart, that something had changed between us. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the ceiling like he was trying to figure out what to say, and then he sighed, turning to look at me with a seriousness that made my heart pound. "I've been feeling the same way," he admitted. "I don't know what's going on with us, but it feels like we're not on the same page anymore." I wanted to tell him everything, about the kiss and how it had been eating me up inside, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I just nodded, agreeing that things had been off lately. We talked for a while, but it was all surface-level stuff such as work stress, the challenges of raising a kid, the usual life things. We didn't get to the heart of it, and when we finally fell asleep, I felt even more disconnected than before. The next day, I decided I needed to clear my head. I took a day off work and drove out to the coast, a place I used to go to think when life got overwhelming. Sitting on the beach, staring out at the endless horizon, I tried to make sense of my feelings. I thought about Chris, about how much he meant to me and how I couldn't imagine my life without him. I thought about David and how something so small as a kiss had thrown me into this tailspin. And I thought about my son, about the family we'd built together and what was really at stake. It would be easy to blame that kiss for everything, to say that it was the catalyst for all the doubts and insecurities I was feeling. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole story. The truth was, I'd been feeling this way for a while. Like something was missing, like there was a part of me that wasn't being fulfilled. The kiss had just brought it to the surface, forcing me to confront what I'd been ignoring for too long. I realized that I needed to talk to David, to clear the air and figure out what, if anything, that kiss meant. I couldn't keep running from it, couldn't keep pretending that it didn't matter. But I also knew that talking to him could open up a whole new can of worms, one that I might not be able to close once it was open. When I got back home that evening, I texted David asking if we could meet up. I told him it was important, that I needed to talk to him about something. He agreed, and we set a time for later in the week. As soon as I sent that message, a wave of anxiety washed over me. I knew this conversation could change everything, for better or worse, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. The days leading up to our meeting were a blur. I went through the motions, taking care of my son, going to work, and pretending everything was fine with Chris. But inside, I was a bundle of nerves, dreading and anticipating the conversation with David in equal measure. I kept running through all the possible scenarios in my head, what he might say, how I would respond, what it would mean for my marriage, for our friendship, for for everything. When the day finally came, I could barely focus on anything else. I told Chris I was going to meet up with a friend, which wasn't a lie, but it felt like one. He didn't seem to suspect anything, just kissed me goodbye and told me to have a good time. The guilt hunted me, but I pushed it down, telling myself that this was something I needed to do for myself and for us. When I met up with David, I was a mess of nerves. We chose a quiet spot in a park, away from the usual haunts where we might run into someone we knew. The weather was overcast, a perfect reflection of the storm brewing inside me. We sat on a bench under a large oak tree, its branches stretching out like a protective canopy. David seemed calm, almost too calm, as if he had no idea what was coming. "I've been thinking a lot about that night," I began, not sure how to dive into what I really wanted to say. David nodded, his expression serious now. "Yeah, I've been thinking about it too." Hearing that made my heart skip a beat. I need to know what it meant to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "because it's been messing with my head, and I don't know how to move forward without figuring this out." He took a deep breath and looked away for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. When he finally turned back to me, his eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe, or a hint of something deeper. "It was just a kiss," he said slowly. "But I can't lie and say it didn't make me think. I've always thought you were amazing, but I never let myself go there because of Chris. He's my best friend, and I'd never want to do anything to hurt him. Or you, for that matter." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of unspoken possibilities. I felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Part of me had hoped he'd say it meant nothing, that it was just a silly moment in a silly game. But another part of me had been craving this, some kind of validation that I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I love Chris, but things have been so off between us lately. And now, after that night, I can't stop thinking about what might have happened if things were different." David reached out and took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You're not alone in this," he said softly. "But whatever happens, we need to be honest with each other, and with Chris. This can't be something we keep to ourselves." The idea of telling Chris made my stomach turn. How could I even begin to explain this to him? But I knew David was right. Keeping this a secret would only make things worse. So I nodded, feeling a sense of dread settle in my chest. That night, after putting my son to bed, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. Chris was in the living room watching TV, completely unaware of the emotional bomb I was about to drop. My heart pounded in my chest as I walked in, my hands trembling. He looked up at me, smiling, but his expression quickly shifted when he saw the look on my face. "What's wrong?" he asked, not being able to control the concern in his voice. I sat down on the edge of the couch, unable to meet his eyes. "Chris, we need to talk." The tension in the room thickened as I started to explain everything, the kiss, my feelings, and my conversation with David. I kept it as honest as I could, leaving out nothing. As the words spilled out, I could see Chris's expression change from confusion to shock to anger. By the time I finished, his face was red, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might break a tooth. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "You kissed my best friend, and now you're sitting here telling me you're having feelings for him? How long has this been going on?" "It's not like that," I tried to explain, but he cut me off. "Not like that? Then what the hell is it like? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're just looking for an excuse to cheat on me." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "I'm not trying to justify anything," I said, my voice shaking. "I just needed to be honest with you because I don't want to hurt you any more than I already have." "Well, congratulations. You've done a hell of a job at that," he spat, standing up and pacing the room. "Do you know how humiliating this is? Not only have you betrayed me, but you did it with the one person I thought I could trust. What the fuck?" Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't wipe them away. "I never meant for any of this to happen, Chris. I love you, and I don't want to lose what we have. But things have been so hard between us lately, and I didn't know how to deal with it." "So your solution is to kiss my best friend?" To fuck with both of our lives? His voice was rising now, each word dripping with bitterness. I tried to reach out to him, but he recoiled, his eyes blazing with fury. "Don't," he warned. "Just don't." The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Chris ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling to keep his composure. When he finally spoke again, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "You've destroyed everything. You know that? Our marriage, my friendship with David, everything we've built together. How do you expect me to ever trust you again?" "I don't know," I whispered, my tears flowing freely now. "I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try, Chris. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Make things right? There's no making things right after this. You've crossed a line and there's no going back. I can't even look at you right now." I felt my heart shatter at his words. This was it. Everything I'd feared was happening right before my eyes. I had pushed too far, and now I was losing everything that mattered to me. Chris's anger was palpable, his pain coming out in every word, and I had no idea how to fix it or if it was even possible. "I think you should leave," he finally said, his voice cold and distant. "I need time to think, and I can't do that with you here." I stared at him, the man I'd loved for so many years, and realized that I had no choice but to do as he asked. I had destroyed his trust, and now I had to face the consequences. Without another word, I stood up and walked out of the room, my legs feeling like lead. As I packed a bag and left the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of the end. Update. It's been a few weeks since everything fell apart, and I wanted to give an update on where things stand now. I'm not even sure why I'm writing this, maybe because I need to process it all, or maybe because I feel like I owe it to everyone who followed along with my mess of a story. Either way, here it is. After that night, I left our house and went to stay with a friend. Chris didn't contact me for days, which felt like a lifetime. I spent every moment replaying everything in my head, wondering how I could have let things get this bad. I kept checking my phone, hoping for some kind of message from him, a text, a missed call, anything that would give me hope that we could still fix this. But there was nothing. Finally, after nearly a week of silence, Chris texted me, asking to meet up. He suggested we go to a neutral place, so we ended up at a coffee shop not too far from where we used to live. I was so nervous I could barely focus on the conversation. Seeing him again, looking so distant and hurt, made my heart ache, but I knew I had to face the consequences of my actions. Chris started the conversation by saying he'd spoken to David. According to Chris, David was just as messed up over the whole situation as I was. He'd been trying to figure out how to approach Chris without making things worse, but apparently Chris had beaten him to the punch. They'd talked for hours, and from what Chris said, it sounded like David had been completely honest with him. He admitted that the kiss meant more than just a moment of weakness, that it had stirred up feelings he didn't even realize he had. But he also made it clear that he had no intentions of pursuing anything with me, especially at the cost of his friendship with Chris. Hearing that made me feel both relieved and devastated. On one hand, it was a relief to know that David wasn't going to try to push this any further. On the other hand, it made everything so much more real. There was no escaping the fact that I had betrayed Chris in the worst possible way, and that betrayal had created a rift that might never be repaired. Chris then told me that he needed time to think, time to heal, and time to decide what he wanted to do about our relationship. He didn't know if he could ever forgive me, but he wasn't ready to make any final decisions just yet. He asked me to give him space, and I agreed, even though it broke my heart to walk away from him again. The next few days were torture. I kept going over everything Chris had said, trying to figure out if there was any hope left for us. I also tried to stay away from social media, because the last thing I needed was to see reminders of our life together. But I couldn't resist the urge to check up on Chris, and that's when I saw it. He had changed his relationship status to single. It felt like a punch to the gut. I knew things were bad, but seeing it out there for the world to see made it feel final. I spent that night crying myself to sleep, mourning the loss of our relationship, But the next morning, something unexpected happened. Chris texted me again, asking if we could talk. This time, we met up at the park where David and I had had our conversation. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, and I walked into that meeting with a heavy heart, expecting the worst. Chris was already there when I arrived, sitting on the same bench where I had sat with David. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much since the last time we saw each other. I sat down beside him, my heart pounding, waiting for him to say whatever it was he needed to say. He started by telling me that he'd been doing a lot of thinking and that he'd come to a decision. My stomach dropped, bracing for the worst. "I can't keep living like this," he said quietly, not looking at me. "I can't keep pretending that things are going to go back to the way they were. Too much has happened, and I don't think I'll ever be able to trust you the same way again." My throat tightened, and I could feel the tears welling up. "Chris, He held up a hand to stop me. "Let me finish. I've talked to David, I've talked to my family, and I've talked to a therapist, and as much as I want to hate you for what happened, I can't. I still love you, but I know that love isn't enough to fix this. I think the best thing for both of us is to end things now, before we end up hating each other." I was speechless. Even though I'd been preparing myself for this, hearing him say it out loud was like a knife to the heart. "I'm filing for divorce," he continued, his voice steady. "I think it's the only way for us to move on. I'll be fair, and we can work out the details together, but this is what I need to do to start healing." I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to process everything he was saying. I knew deep down that he was right, that our relationship was too damaged to repair, but that didn't make it any easier to accept. Even in front of him, I couldn't stop crying. "I'm sorry," I finally managed to choke out. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Chris nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I know you didn't, but that doesn't change what happened. We both need to move on." After that, the conversation turned to practical matters, how we would divide our assets, what we would tell our families, and how we would handle things with our son. It was the most painful conversation of my life, but it was also strangely cathartic. For the first time since the kiss, I felt like I was finally facing the consequences of my actions head on. When we parted ways, there were no tears, no dramatic goodbyes, just a quiet understanding that this was the end of our journey together. I watched him walk away, feeling a mixture of sorrow and relief. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I also knew that this was the right decision for both of us. And that's where things stand now. We're in the process of finalizing the divorce, and I'm trying to figure out how to rebuild my life. It's not easy, and there are days when I feel like I'll never get through this. But I'm taking it one day at a time, and I'm learning to forgive myself for the mistakes I've made. So that's my update. It's not the happy ending I hoped for, but it's a new beginning, and maybe that's what I need right now.